Just give me the thumbs up. Hey, and welcome to Nerdarchy for Nerds by Nerds. I am Nerdarchist Ted. Dave is out of the house today, so today I am hanging out with
Nerder Doug.
So tonight, as you can see from our display here, or the title or what have you, tonight we're going to talk about running D&D and talking about art.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
how are you doing this evening, Doug?
I am doing great. I'm painfully aware this week that I need to get a green screen or something because you guys got these cool backgrounds, and it's like I'm new to the streaming world.
Dave has got the green
Yeah, you
screen to
got the
try
real
and
deal.
mimic this, but I'm legitimately here on the set. I can pick this stuff up, and yeah, it's here. For those of you out there who aren't aware, Doug is part of Nerdarchy now, and he'll be kind of tag teaming in every once in a while. You did the live chat for our awesome patrons last night. How do you feel about that?
It was a lot of fun. We just talked about me being on board and what we had planned, and like for the website and the channel and that sort of thing. So it was pretty cool. Interacting with people. My man Nick from D&D and the Castle was there, of course.
Nice. So as I said, we're going to talk about art. We'll let some people get the notification and get on board. But as we come up with this topic, there's a lot of different ways to incorporate art into the game, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So number one, you can grab an art book, and I've got a stack here of some awesome art that I own that sometimes is on the shelf. For instance, Brian, our friend from Creature Creation in the World of Revelo, this is an art book of his stuff. So you could easily just flip through a book like this, find a piece of art, be like, oh, I want to use that for my game. So you have inspiration to actually create something. So how often do you do something like that, Doug?
Oh, all the time. Maybe not with books specifically, but for every campaign, I always start a Pinterest board because I find a ton of inspiration from the art, and it's super cool. Like you just said, to show the players like this looks like this, and especially with all the fantasy art there to show them like vistas, landscapes, and things. That's like no, I could describe it all day, but a picture's worth 1,000 words. So it's really cool to show them things like that. And with your example there too, what's cool about that, and I think you've done this too, it's like that's the kind of thing because there's no game material in there. You could literally be like, you find this book in the treasure hoard.
Absolutely. I've got a book that I could do something like that with, and I've got a Diablo book here, and it's got a cool skull on it. The Book of Cain. So again, it's something I've had for years. I was a big Diablo fan, and since there's no mechanics, you could just be like, boom, you hand it out at the table, and they can flip through it. And then if the actual player goes and reads through and finds something, you could have notations, in your notes that like, oh, you read this, and they ask you about it. You could slide them the extra piece of information that they find that might give you, more of your homebrew stuff. They could just be like, oh, well, let me roll an investigation check, or I read it, tell me what. Okay, yeah, they can do that if they like, but if the player actually goes the extra mile, you could be like, all right, this is the extra information you get because you actually chose to do your homework.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love that kind of stuff too, with like the scales of like how much info you get, like from 4E and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, treasure or art. I'm sorry. Reminds me of treasure because you often find it as treasure, like you were just saying. You can find books, but like I and we all talked about in the newsletter too is you know art can lead to whole other adventures. I mean, just finding like a painting in a treasure hoard of like a thieves guild or anything really that would hoard treasure. It's like that's a chance for you to like a lot of times we'll just write like an art object worth 50 gold, but it's like maybe a character's interested in painting and they're like, I want to, like, do I know who the artist was, where it came from, how did it get there, and go, find a dealer to sell it and stuff. So that can lead to a lot of different things too through art.
So, I mean, it absolutely could lead to, a variety of quests because what happens if, like, oh, this is a famous painting
Yeah.
and it was stolen. It was last known to exist, in this noble's
Yeah.
house. Well, now you have it and you're trying to sell it. Are you the thief? And if you can't backtrack where you got it to show, like, you might get hauled off to prison. Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
that item might be really valuable.
Yeah, imagine
But,
if some thief in the real world, in our world, just like was, robbing somebody's mansion, and it's like, oh, this is like the Mona Lisa or something
yeah.
type of level. It's like everybody in the world would be looking for you because they want, it's a famous piece of art. So that's pretty cool.
So like that's a whole nother layer to it, is just okay, you found it and it has the ability to lead to more.
Mm-hmm.
So some things might be incredibly valuable, but you can't just walk down the street and be like, hey, look, this book or this painting is worth 15,000 gold. Here, I just stick out my hand and someone hands me 15,000 gold. You have to find somebody who is willing to pay that kind of price for that sculpture or that, that painting, and that's without the difficulties of, well, you need to carry it. Oh, well, this is a 5x5 painting, in a marble frame, or this is a 1,000 pound statue. How are you hauling this darn thing out? Yeah, the dragon might have just been able to lift it up and fly away, but that's not so much for you. 1,000 pounds is even, beyond Tensor's floating disk capacity. So what do you got?
Yeah, I like Andrew Carson's comments about tools. You could use your forger's kit combined with a history saving throw to forge art. That's pretty cool, making like a paste, duplicate of something. But when you were talking, I was thinking, you're talking about like marble frames. It's like we're just kind of assuming like humanoid art, and it's like there's so many fantastical creatures. Like, what is art like to them? Like you were telling me about Beholder in your game, or like giants. It's like a sculpture, like a sculpture to a giant would be like an enormous obelisk and stuff, and or just who knows what they consider art.
That's absolutely true. So that's a whole another thing to look at with your treasure, is to find out, like, all right, who has it? You can have something in a noble or a politician's, stronghold or room. You can have something in a dragon's cave. You can have something that's owned by that goes back hundreds of years. That's been lost for civilization because it's been there.
Mm-hmm.
I had an undead beholder. And beholders, everything is about the orb or the sphere. So that's how I treated all of his art. He had a shrine that had books and orbs and rings and gems, anything that could be construed as spherical or round, that was over here. And then he had just stuff shoved in, I can't say corners because there was no his lair. Everything was spherical or round, but it was shoved off to the side in a heap, in a pile that clearly showed he didn't care about it. It might have value,
mm-hmm.
From someone that he either killed or he went and robbed. However it came to be, but he didn't care about it. It's got value, so he's not going to just disintegrate it. But it was there.
You can let your minions use that stuff.
But everything else was off to the side, and it was like, I loved it. I mean, even like the robe of eyes, that spoke to the beholder. So that was put on,
mm-hmm.
That was hanging up delicately
on a spotlight on it, continual flame. So it's very
so like all of that kind of stuff. And like honestly, when you come to even if it's like a mid-level big bad, something that's like, this is going to be a credible threat, I honestly feel this is where you can take a little bit more time planning out your treasure. Don't just roll it up and shove it in there. Think about what's something, whatever you're planning, what would they have?
Yeah.
Would they care about historical significance? Would they care about particular themes? Would they care about the structure of the object? Would they care about the materials that were used? Dwarves, are all about, their smithing and stonework and all this. So for them, metal and stone, no problems. But would they have like a wooden carving?
Right.
Most likely not. But elves absolutely would. They might have a plant that has been like magically or, just cultivatedly grown in such a design or such a shape, over decades or hundreds of years, because there is that love for nature and all of that stuff. So these are things to consider. And so
while you're talking to it, made me think like when you're saying like would dwarves have a wooden thing or something, that could be awesome opportunities to like start putting little things for the characters' backstories or just personal interests in there. Like maybe somebody has like their clan was wiped out or their elven home. It's like maybe it's a piece of art from that place, and you just drop it in there and like it's just buried under gold. Doesn't mean anything to them, but it's like, oh wow, and like only that character would know.
and that always into our tip of is there a way to
Yeah.
tie your character story into what's going on.
You know,
um,
even better would be is if another character was like secretly found some kind of art treasure like that, like say a rogue's like, oh, I'm gonna pocket this thing and make that tied to the other character's backstory, and so it's like maybe down the road they'll
we'll talk about
have a
yeah.
dramatic moment. Yeah, that'd be cool.
And that's something that you can set up and put in the works. And you want to be respectful of the character stories of not giving away any information that hasn't already been shared. But if he's already said, oh yeah, the Fox clan is no more, and this guy's used to be with the Fox, and Mr. Rogue comes up and, hey, I found a Fox clan thing. Hey, cool.
Yeah.
And they sit on it, a couple sessions later, be like, hey, I found this thing. But it's more than likely, given my experience, if the information isn't out there, then it's far easier to be like, okay, I found a thing. Doesn't matter what you said it is. I'm just going to sell it and pocket the gold.
Yeah, right. Another thing, even that can lead to cool role playing things. Like, what if it's a piece of art from like some like evil empire that like the people in that town remember as being like cursed or something, so it's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna sell this. They like do some kind of like warding sign and just like, oh no, get out of here. So the players might be like, what's going on, what's wrong, is this thing cursed? And it's nothing magical, it's just represents something like dark or painful to the people in that area or whoever they're selling it to. That could be a cool avenue to explore too.
So we got a question here. Well, it wasn't something that they tagged us, but the thing is jumping so fast. But somebody said something about do they have a artist subclass for the bard? Not that I've seen, but the first or one of the bards that I made was a guild artisan, and he was an artist that went into bardic stuff. I forget whether he was a painter or a sculptor or something along those lines, but definitely was, in that direction, in competition with the Thane's son, and the Thane's son kind of destroyed his reputation and what have you, which led him into a life of adventuring.
The dungeon class followed up. They said something with mechanics where they paint something in the air and it is summoned. Yeah, that sounds like it would be pretty cool.
I think there was like a magic item, or is a magic item that does something like that.
Nolzur's something pigments. That's what Jester has on Critical Role,
okay.
So she makes her traveler statues out of it and stuff. But yeah, for sure. I mean, man, we're seeing some really neat, like kind of off the wall Unearthed Arcana lately. So who knows? I mean, they could make an artist monk come out next or something for all we know. You know what I mean? Like where they use like a giant calligraphy brush to make symbols on the ground. Who knows?
Well, you never know. I doubt they're going to do Monk because they've just done Monk.
Let's see. What would be a totally opposite thing that you would not expect to be in there? A fighter?
Fighter, yeah, okay. Fighter.
He's an artist with the sword. Yeah, that'd be pretty cool.
There is definitely art in sword work or blade work.
Hey. What was that 4E book with all that stuff? It was like towards the tail end of it, or third edition. I'm sorry. It had all like the different styles, like the white crane and the book of swords or something.
Might have been. Yeah, that cool. That's going back quite a ways, and there's been a lot of RPGs between now and then.
But speaking of fighters, interesting thing there is like fighters. It's pretty. I don't want to trivialize it, but it's like it's pretty easy to make a fighter character that can fight really well without like kind of taking a bunch of little like incremental things elsewhere. So like a fighter character would be a great character to make an artist because it's like yeah, plenty of extras. Like they don't really rely on like the skills they have, proficiencies. So it's like yeah, take
Correct.
performance and like history, and maybe you guys like an art dealer, on the
So
side.
I mean, honestly, you could cheese the system and say, oh, well, I'm going to take performer or performer background, but do the alternate and go gladiator,
Mm-hmm.
and you still have performance. So you could still be like, okay, well, I want to get this.
Mm-hmm.
You could take something that gets you a tool set, and voila, like, oh yeah, well, I know how to perform. Do artwork on the side.
There is a 3D graffiti artist bard subclass emerging in the chat. I'm digging that. A Banksy the Bard. I like that. But it's not unlikely. Like, even if you were just a mercenary, and it's like maybe you just are really good at fighting, and you just really love art, and it's like, look, I'm gonna sell my sword and amass this art collection. That could be an awesome character motivation.
Well, it's one of the things that I think more people should be doing. I feel that fifth edition really opened doors to say that, like, I've got a profession and a hobby,
Yes.
and most people are just like, I'm making a this,
Mm-hmm.
and like, you don't have to do that. Your background and your class do not have to completely mesh and merge together.
The first game of 5e I played, well, not second, I played it when it was next, but that was one of the things I thought was so cool because they just gave us pre-gens at Gen Con. But I played a criminal background paladin. I remember thinking like, wow, this is neat. So like, there's already this like crazy story of like what made him become a paladin after being a criminal and stuff. And I thought that was awesome. And a lot of our character build guides, that's when we're planning them out, a little behind the scenes here, like that's often the funnest part of the conversation. Like, what kind of background would become this crazy, like, like the Slayer of Evil or whatever. You think like, oh, they're an acolyte. It's like, no, he was like, like a lazy student and stuff. Oh, was a cloistered scholar and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like those. That's fun to play with. So yeah, artist background, painter supplies.
Well, to tie that into, to tie your criminal paladin, I mean, you could literally, like, okay, you were sent to do a job, you have whether you were robbing a house or whether you were robbing a temple, like, you go to touch, the item. And up until this point in time, you were like, I don't care about this whole thing about morals and being good. And, whether, like, you go to touch it and, like, you realize, holy crud, this is not something I should be doing. Or maybe, like, a voice speaks to you, whether it's an angel, whether it's a god, whether it's something else, whether it is a cleric hiding in the background, casting a cantrip or something like at you to try and like dissuade you from it. You could have this cool story of like, all right, well, literally an art object, changed my character's whole view on life.
Mm-hmm.
And he decides to set out from that point in time to become a better person, and he makes a vow and becomes a paladin, and now I'm a champion for justice, and
Mm-hmm.
I know how to be sneaky, and I know how to sense the people who are doing that stuff, and I know
Mm-hmm.
thieves can't.
Yeah,
But
and I can pick locks because I think because you get thieves tools.
yeah, you get.
But by that same token, like that's what would be cool by what you're saying, like a fighter with an artist background. It's like when that actually comes up in play, it's like that guy is like a art history major. It's like I thought he was just like a mercenary. It's like I went to college, I majored in art history. That's clearly from the beholder age of rule wars,
and
whatever.
and it's just fantastic, and you have a character that just steps out from that normal thing. And I'm used to, I mean, even now, and we're 5-6 years into fifth edition, and I'm looking at characters that I had made years ago, and it's like, all right, this dude's a fighter, this dude's a barbarian, and they're stuck on fighter or the stuck
Yeah.
on barbarian, and now it is like not only easy but like almost to the point where they're like, well, really, there's no reason why you shouldn't be stepping out and taking a skill that is outside of your class, so that you've got something that shows that you're not just a one-sided hitting machine.
Yeah, I like to think of it. It's like, yeah, those kind of skills and stuff from your background are kind of like the lens that your class shines through. You know, it's like, because like even if you had like painter supplies and performance skills and you were a fighter, it's like that would probably be different than if you were a wizard. It's like, what's their view? They probably have like a mystical bent of interests in art and stuff, or maybe they don't. Who knows?
Well, I mean, a fighter that gets into, history, like you could be a tactician. You could be somebody who's like, oh, well, I've studied warfare throughout the ages, and I know that, oh, well, this painting here, that's from the Red War, and this one here, well, this is clearly a fake because the red pigment is off. It's clearly used because you can see that they used this type of sand in the in the coloration of the pigments, and really not there in the other one. So like you could get into like the real nitty gritty of it, and like it's still tied to the character. You're still interested in different aspects, but because you've described it in such a way that you understand that, okay, he's passionate about something. It's
yeah. And all these things too. It's like I feel like we often kind of talk about them from like a DM's perspective. It's like you could insert these things and stuff, but I learned this from you guys years ago when I was just a wee Nerdarchy fan. Is I mean, when you give it back to the players to like, I want you to build the world with me and stuff, and like tell me like what you see. So like if there was a painting, you might be like, oh, do I recognize it? Just give them the agency to just say like, hey, you actually recognize it. You tell me what it looks like and stuff like that.
I was trying to find the book.
I know what I want to pick your brain about though, as I thought while you're talking.
This is where I learned player agency from.
Because I know you'll love this. Is like, what about like artistic magic items? Like I had something in mind that I've discussed, but I'm curious what your brain comes up with when you hear like art object magic item.
So, I mean, we already mentioned that there is the, I can draw in the air and make a legitimate, thing that lasts for a little while. But I mean, you could go with, something along those lines. You can go with something that is a magical tool set that, like, it legitimately just, whether it gives you a plus or it gives you an advantage or expertise, like those are all things with any tool set that you could do. You could make it out of a bizarre or interesting material. You could have it so that, oh, well, I've got a set of thieves tools that when I go to open the lock, it'll give me a warning. Therefore, advantage on my reflex save.
Oh.
If I
that's cool. If there's a trap.
If there's a trap, along the same lines, you could have some kind of artist tools that corrects your mistake. So like, oh, well, okay, I'm going to carve, and you basically get to do it. It might correlate to the same thing as advantage, but your character is aware.
Yeah.
So you roll, and then you roll a second time. So like, if you roll poorly, it's like, oh, well, I can do better than that.
It's like when you have the hammer and chisel, and you're like, oh, that didn't sound right. It's like, should I hit it again? Like, ding. It's like, well, you just crack apart, or maybe it's like that perfect.
Even comical when you when you hit the statue and the nose falls off. Like, for that, like you would literally see that happen, and then the nose would fly up and reattach. Yeah. So like, for you, that could be a very cool magic item. And even though mechanically it's no different than rolling with advantage, it becomes something special for what stories happen because of that. And you could do that with any type of artisanal or artisan tool. But when you correlate it with art specifically, because there's beauty, because there's perception involved, it gets to have a little bit of fun with it.
Yeah.
But
So
that's what I came up with off the top of my head. What do you got?
So there's an adventure. I forget what it's called, but like the hook is that you're hired to steal a painting, and presumably you do, but the painting actually it's like of a woman in like a prison cell, and like when moonlight shines on it, it animates, and she asks for your help, and you can like step into the painting, but it's a trap that traps you in this mega dungeon. And I was just thinking, like, stuff like that could be really cool, and whether it's, I mean, and that's a classic thing where like the painting moves, but you can do all kinds of crazy stuff as a DM. They could be portals to wherever they are, or like traps where you get trapped in the painting, and
In my Curse of Narkitas game, I actually had made a painting that was kind of that, but it was a prison. So like there were 3 people. It was like a 5 foot by 15, 5 foot tall by 15 foot wide, painting with 3 different sections, and there were 3 people in there. So like for the most part, they were static, but every once in a while, like it would shift and move because the people in it were like in this super slow time, so like, all right, you might come back and it's vastly different because you've been gone for an hour, and that means they've been moving for a minute. But it's a scenario that the people were able to get removed from it, and they went back to their own dimensions, because in my games there's always extra dimensional pockets.
Oh, yeah.
And portals to strange places. That's one of my favorite things to explain. Sure. And especially in the early games of early sessions of the Curse of Narkitas, we were playing in a time frame where not magic, but like plethora of magic items was really, really low.
Mm-hmm.
So the only way to reward them with magic items was to have them go somewhere else. So that's how I brought extra magic items in. So at one point in time, they were in essentially, they were they were between the planes, and there was this just weird tower, and in that tower there was this painting that had these three prisoners.
There's who's probably pretty good artists is high level wizards. I mean, drawing all those chalk arcane symbols on the ground and stuff, that's probably pretty artistic.
I don't know so much about whether it is artistic or just precise.
Yeah, that's true.
But I mean, you could even go so far as to require, like, all right, you got to make a check to see if you remember it correctly or drew it correctly.
So you got a keen mind. It's like, of course you do. I can't.
Well, just because you know it, does that mean you can put it on accurately?
That'd be a cool way to reward like spell scrolls as treasure for a wizard, though. Too, it's like maybe you're just in somebody's house, like a noble's manor, and you're just like, yeah, they have art on the wall, and you're examining it. It's like they just think it's like an artistic thing, but it's actually like that's and somebody mentioned the gate spell. Somebody used that example, and you're like, your low wizard's like, that's a gate spell scroll just like hanging on their wall. Like, they don't even know. I gotta get that.
I hadn't even thought to go that route, to literally have a scroll framed as artwork.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure I have stuff in here that's just like Japanese writing or something that it's like, yeah, it looks cool. Like, I don't know what it says or anything, but the right person would. John Sallow, we are talking about art in RPGs, he asks, and I haven't seen a lot of questions, so I can only imagine the chat is having their own crazy conversation.
Yeah, I keep looking down every once in a while, and it seems that they keep talking about bards.
Yeah. Hey, anybody can be an artist, people. It's not just bards.
That is true, except me. I can't do art, or at least not.
I'm sure something you do could be considered an art.
Oh
my God! Yes, Andrew Carson. Netflix's Velvet Buzzsaw offers good inspiration for cursed art. Yes, I don't remember all the particulars, but that movie was super D inspiring.
Velvet Buzzsaw, huh?
Yeah, it's like kind of like it gets kind of to be a gory like horror slasher movie, but it's like this piece of art. It's all about like art dealers in L.A., but there's like a piece of art, and it's slowly like people die that have it, and it's like causing these deaths and stuff. So yeah,
I'll check out the trailer and see if it's something that
a
is
lot of blood.
no, blood doesn't bother me.
Same here, but it's like I don't like seeing people get like like mutilated. But it's like, yeah, just like when you just see like a spray of blood, it's like, oh.
I'm not fond of like the being startled and the jump scares and that kind of stuff. That's where like I'm like, nope, not for me.
So we got two questions.
For me, I guess the closest thing for art that I would do would be my painting, but like there's already a surface to work with, and sometimes like with this guy, like the lines on his side, well, that's me. I did those extra details.
Well, then you'll be pleased to know that in addition to that, Cameron F says DMing is definitely an art, and you're an artist, Ted.
Well, thank you. I meant like drawing and
paintings. I couldn't paint that thing that well.
No, I've.
Does it make you feel something when you look at it?
I don't know. I mean, I'm happy about it. I think it came out pretty decent.
I think it looks cool. I mean, I like the different colors. That's artistic,
I got this guy here.
Is that like a alligator dragon?
It's like a humanoid alligator. He's got extra spiky bits.
Did you paint that?
I did, yes.
Wow, that looks great.
Oh, thank you.
Look at Ted's art is being displayed live. Yeah, that looks cool, man.
Yeah, I'm not the best. I know that there are people out there who, what would the good people would tear my stuff apart, like, oh my God.
If they're good people, they'd appreciate that you put effort into it.
Well, I mean, from the critique standpoint, right. There are people who will be like, oh, well, you need to do this, and I don't see that, and you need to work on your shading, and you got to come in, all those little peaks, you got to come in with dry brushing and hit those up with, the big contrast colors, and I'm still learning. Yeah, I'm still trying to get better.
So
maybe go for it.
As I say, there is a few questions. Some seem like easy to knock out. What are we talking about? We're talking about art in RPGs and D&D. John Sallow, Tang Langfa. Oh no, that wasn't a question. Sorry.
Tang Langfa.
Let's see. What are we talking about tonight? Art. There was another one. Oh, so the creation of art or its gold value in D&D setting. Both those, and anything tangentially related, and we'll probably get off topic as well.
Because it's the live chat. We always get off topic.
What other artwork could also be a useful magic item, would you guys think of?
Well, anything can be art, and anything can be useful. It's a matter of getting to the right circumstances, for that. Anytime that you have a tool set that creates something, like. My shirt says about making ale. Brewing ale is an art form. Making wine is an art form. You have to carefully cultivate your ingredients. You have to go through it. And when you wind up going through this process, you get a finished product at the end. And whether you've done a good job, a mediocre job, or a crappy job, is gonna determine what that end product is, and all of that weighs in.
So, Spill the Beans said, Everwinds, do they use magic to make their good bread, or is it just good?
You want me to spill the beans? Nah, it's just a good recipe.
That's an art, though. The art of baking. I mean, that's an art and a science, by the way. Baking.
'Tis true. I am not a good baker, and I've from the people that I've talked to, the best bakers are the ones that don't measure.
Really?
Yeah, they know the recipe.
They just know it that well.
And they don't go in like, okay, it takes a half a cup of flour. They put in, and they know right now this is what it needs. I can follow a recipe, and I can cook, and I can do what have you. But like when it's something says just a pinch, or cook until it does this.
Yeah.
Like what? No, it's got to be
Yeah.
got to be increments. There's got to be time measurements here.
Ted, here's a broad question.
Oh,
What's the best part of having a great YouTube channel?
The best part of having a great YouTube channel. I honestly have to say that interacting with the fans, getting, whether it be digitally or in person, because both Dave and I, we don't turn anything on or dial anything up or down. What you see, and same is true with Doug, what you see behind the screen is who I am and who we are on a day-to-day basis. And now when you get to see a fan and like, hey, I know who you are, and you can have that conversation, like they can read that. They can see, hey, this guy really is that passionate about this.
Mm-hmm.
And I've literally interacted with dozens, if not, into the triple digits of fans over the years in person at conventions or, wherever else. I get spotted far more often than Dave does, whether it's because I go out and about more or whether it's just like, I'm wearing a nerdy shirt that you'll see online, and this is me. It's not a wig. This is my hair that's running away. I don't know, but I mean, at the local grocery store, at literally at my daughter's school. I've been spotted. At a craft store, even like I'm sitting here looking at paint, and the guy's like, I know you. I'm like, perhaps you do.
Stay nerdy.
But I mean, yeah, it's a passion, and just like art,
Mm-hmm.
the getting, you see me, unless I'm like super busy and I'm on a timeline, I'll stop and have a conversation with you and prove that I legitimately am who I am, and and I'm just as eager to talk to you to see what your experience about
Mm-hmm.
Nerdarchy is.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to agree. I mean, it's definitely cool to make products and all that stuff. But yeah, with even the chat right now, I'm thinking like it's cool to be able to like share our thoughts about like we're just talking about D&D. We just there happens to be a camera on, but also like watching the people's not only saying like, "Oh, that sounds cool," but their ideas like, "Ooh, I'm gonna try that next time I run a game," or I want to play that kind of character or whatever. So yeah, that's
and
definitely the cool part. Especially
and
growing
and
up for us, there was no internet, so it's like there was no way to connect with like hundreds of people or
yeah, I mean, like, unless you had an active gaming store, like that didn't really happen until third edition. That it was a little bit more mainstream. Like
Mm-hmm.
you had to go to a shop that might also have D&D stuff. Um, it wasn't until third edition that really it was, I guess, a little bit more mainstream, that gaming shops that's specifically tailored towards role-playing games and collectible card games and that kind of stuff, that might have also done comic book stuff, but it was legitimately like, hey, I'm trying to make this work.
Yeah. Oh my god, this
um,
is a funny question from Cody Sams. If a player fails terribly on a check to make a painting, can they just make a killing on it by calling it abstract art? It's like, hey man, to the
okay,
right buyer. See, that could be
that's
an
gonna
adventure. You could like, okay, who's the top critics in this art scene in this town? It's like I need to get this thing into one of these art shows and stuff. So yeah, absolutely, man. If you can pull it off, that's where your player can make the adventure happen for them. It's like I
to
want to
me
sell
that
this thing.
to me that's gonna come down to how good you are at persuasion and
Mm-hmm.
deception.
That's what I'm saying. It could be a whole party thing, I mean, and players they love planning out elaborate things that will probably not work at all. But it's like, okay, I'm gonna cast like mislead and then blah 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 or whatever. We'll cast non-detection on the painting to sneak it into the art gallery. Cast invisibility on the thing that's there, hang it up. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
a
but
player too, man. I want to do that crazy shit.
so I agree with Kayla. Rewarding a player once for being creative is great,
Yeah,
but not rewarding every time someone
right.
who fails. that's setting things up incorrectly, in my opinion.
Yeah, I feel like
So
I'm a lucky gamer because you know, and like I never think of those kind of things of like players like, oh, they're just going to abuse it, or like they're going to cast fabricate to, you know, make 10,000 daggers a day and become billionaires, because like I just have never played with people that are like that.
well, I liked.
Like they wouldn't be like, ooh, we should just quit adventuring and make crappy art and sell it. Like it might be a funny thing on the side, but yeah, it wouldn't be like a
Well,
consistent.
in order to get that high, like you have to understand that the things that you have the capacity to make, like okay, you can make some money, but at the same time, like you might be able to make more money just adventuring
Yes.
than doing that kind of stuff. Now, Nate made a while ago a really interesting character. I think he was like a dwarven bard that had something else that you know he had a what's it called, the thing that like has the extra dimensional space that you fold and like it folds up,
Portable hall.
portable hole. And the whole concept of this character was, he traveled all around, and his shop was called a hole in the wall. So he would go to wherever it was, and he would just unfold his hole up against someone else's wall, and he'd set up his shop.
It's a
But he
fantasy
was
pop up shop.
but he was a strong enough caster that like he had fabricate, and he would just stockpile the reserves of metal or wood or whatever else that he would need. So when somebody would say, hey, do you have a shield or a sword or a suit of armor, like he could just go over to the thing, cast fabricate, and be like, bloop, there you go. So
That's
obviously,
awesome.
a long sword or a shield has a very low cost, but oh, you want plate mail? Sure. No need to wait 6 months. Here it is.
That's so. Is that stuff he would just kind of do, like, you know, between, you know, like, oh, what are you doing while you're in town, and you know, it's just like I'm gonna do that. So it didn't, like you were saying earlier, like you wouldn't want something to like overtake the whole campaign. It's just like,
Right.
yeah, that's just something he did. Sometimes it wasn't like,
So
you
that
know,
was a character he played for like a small story arc
yeah,
that
that's a
we
great
had.
idea.
But I mean that's a fantastic character, and it's something that you could literally just have in your world. And when business dries up in one town, he travels to the next, and being a competent adventurer,
Mm-hmm.
he can travel just fine. But I mean, you're